I'm Rodney B. Smith, former president of Web Series Canada and TO Webfest, and one of the founders. And Aron, this is Aron Levitz. He is with, this is a very complicated name now. It's now Wattpad WEBTOON Studios. Wattpad recently got purchased, and they've been merged together. And Aron he's been there for about 10 years. So the whole change of Wattpad into a studios division has been quite interesting. So,
yeah, it was my 10-year anniversary was a month ago. When I started, there was about 1 million users on one platform. Now we're up to 160 plus million users on 2 platforms. So things have changed a whole lot in 10 years, as we talked about.
Yeah, Wattpad boasts about 85 million active users monthly, with 3 million active writers, and now with the combination of WEBTOON, that number has pretty much skyrocketed. But one of the biggest things that people have always been wondering about with their books is how the heck do I get it onto the screen? And with from the instant that the Wattpad Studios, or it was initially Wattpad Studios, WEBTOON Studios has been announced, all the writers on the platform have been wondering, how can I take that step to get my book developed by Wattpad Studios? So to that end, the first question is, what does the development process look like when Wattpad and WEBTOON Studios decides they want to move ahead with optioning or developing a book off the platform?
Does everyone know what Wattpad and WEBTOON is? In fact, I know a bunch of you, anyways, I've met before. No? Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Wattpad is the world's largest reading and writing platform, social network. You have an idea, you post first chapter, all of a sudden you have a couple million reads, maybe 1 billion reads of your story, and you're one of the most important authors in the world. WEBTOON, the same thing, but for comics. It's really the largest digital comic platform in the world, bigger than anything else. Started in Korea, but is now a worldwide phenomenon. And so what the studio does is we look at the most important stories across both platforms and try to bring them to life. And to life can be on screen, it can be TV, it can be film, it can be animation. We've done digital-only projects, but we also do traditional publishing. So the stories that were born online, you can go to Indigo or Barnes & Noble, or actually we sell books in 30 plus languages around the world, and find those of your favorite authors now in print. As Rodney mentioned, it started as just Wattpad, and then our offices are like half a block from here, and then we got bought by a giant Korean company called WEBTOON, so that is where that second platform comes from. And the process for the studio is actually pretty simple, is we just listen to fans. So with 85 million people on both platforms, they're telling us what they love, why they love it, the parts they like, the parts they don't like, the characters that they cannot get enough of, and the characters they cannot understand why an author put in there. And we kind of listen to that fandom, look at the data, mix out a little art and science of amazing screenwriters, actors, front of the camera, behind the camera talent to bring those things to life. So the development process itself starts in a very unique way, like nobody else does it, which is actually listening to fans. I know it's wild to think that nobody does that, but it's true. And then from there, we really are developing with kind of the biggest, brightest screenwriters around the world. In fact, on the AV side, we are developing and producing in 8 plus languages around the world right now. So, we just had a TV show in Indonesia come out today, to be honest, called The Sexy Doctor Is Mine. I swear to God, that's what it's called. I didn't write it, but the fans loved it, and it does really well.
Yeah, the Spanish and the Philippine market is actually pretty big for you guys too.
Yeah, so the English markets, so on the Wattpad side, the English market's our biggest market. On the WEBTOON side, the Korean and Japanese markets are the 2 biggest, but English is right behind. On the Wattpad side, Spanish is the 2nd biggest language, and Philippines is our 4th biggest country. And actually, we took off in the early days in the Philippines before even English language took off, totally by accident. It just is a society that is steeped in literature. Like, authors are rock stars there. So if I go out with our biggest writers in Philippines, we get mobbed. you can think of 2 writers that you recognize at best. Maybe there's 3 because you know someone after Stephen King and J.K. Rowling. But after that, like authors can walk down pretty much any street and you're going to be okay. Philippines, it is wild. So we grew there very quickly. But yeah, all those countries are quite important for us. In fact, Spanish language, we have the largest Spanish language film of all time on Netflix called A Través de Fomentana, which is the first in a series by a writer named Ariana Godoy, who's currently the best-selling Spanish author in the world. So Wattpad really has been like a breeding ground for some amazing talent all over the world.
All right. So with that in mind, now I know I've been following Ariana's journey, and I know her journey is not the same as everyone's, because there's different levels of involvement. But typically, how much involvement will an author have in the development of the script and the project?
I think it really depends. You know, in most cases, just like in most places where IP is being adapted, the author, the underlying IP, is not usually the screenwriter. Most of the time, because it's a very different art form, and on vast majority of the time, they're just not interested in doing it, right? So if we can work with, you know, Jonathan Abrams is a partner of ours for a project called What Happened That Night, which is written by a woman from Buffalo. Okay, he's Academy nominated, so she's like, yeah, he can write that, that's cool, I'll work with him, right? So our writers give notes on the process. We always do a lot of upfront research with our writers and our screenwriting partners so they understand, the screenwriters understand what the fans loved, what they didn't love, what parts can go, what parts they think should stay. You know, our screenwriters are our partners, so we can't tell them to do all that stuff, but they use that to incorporate it. They do see notes throughout. We don't make them watch every daily, but we definitely let them see some rough cuts so they get a feel for it. There's set visits. Ariana has cameos in all of hers as they get developed. But we try to keep them as more involved than I'd say a normal underlying IP owner who usually just gets their work license and never hears from it again until it shows up on screen.
Yeah, hello, author. Here's a trailer. Goodbye.
Yeah, if they see the trailer first. They'll probably see the trailer the same time you do. And so we work a lot harder to make sure.
You know, the trailer on the set, go in there and hide.
Oh, if they're allowed on set. The first movie we ever shot, we had to really fight for it because they're like, no, authors don't come to sets. I'm like, well, ours do. They do starting now. So it's surprising how much if you aren't a Stephen King, how much you are just not part of the process. And even for the biggest authors in the world, most of them are not in any of the writers' rooms. They're not part of that creative process, almost at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of authors really don't understand the big difference between writing something for the screen and just writing for a novel. It is a huge different process. And in web series, we have a very similar process, but it's just to script writing. It's just that our arcs tend to be a little bit shorter. And it's like focus on the whole episodic thing. Now, Wattpad has been doing a lot of the episodic, serialized work, and there's a bit of crossover when it comes to that kind of thinking. But you guys have been focused mostly on on movies, features, or on series?
It's actually a pretty even split. So we have about, call it 150 plus projects in development around the world. I'd say it's probably about 30-40% series, and the same for film. And then animation is still fairly new because we really only dove into animation really when we got acquired by WEBTOON. So I'd say about 20-30% of what we do is on the animation side. Of course, animation can be film or series. They just, especially in Hollywood, they are bought by different types of people. So that's why we have them split that way. So really, we let the story kind of dictate what it should be. There are a lot of stories that are very clearly 3-act films that, you know, this is the medium they need to be, and they can be a franchise, but each book is a film. And there's other things like, take Tower of God as an example, which is a huge webtoon. It's, gosh, I don't know, 600 episodes or something close to that. So, hey, that might be a series we want to look at. So that's kind of where the art and science comes into it, right? The fans can tell us what something is that they love, but it's really up to my development team to kind of understand what medium this is going to sing the best in. And sometimes we figure this could be TV or film, and we develop them side by side. Sometimes we develop them separately. Sometimes we develop them in two different languages. We actually have one project that is a film in one country and a series in another. So we really have to look at how that content has come to fruition and say this is the best medium to present that story in.
Well, there's definitely a different angle. So what? Do I want to go with this one, or do I want to skip?
Well, now I want to hear it.
Okay, fine. It's a basic one, but
okay, basic.
Okay, fine. What can we expect for the story adaptation, and how big of changes should authors expect?
Oh my goodness. God. Now I don't want to hear it. I couldn't. Your mic's off. Look. It really. Sorry. I said this to my head of film the other day. So I don't know what this means. You can stop recording now. You can't like slap a book around an omelet and tell people it's the same thing, right? Like, so you can't just use the name of a story and change everything else behind it. There are bones of that story that are important to the fandom. And we want our fandom to be happy because they all come and watch it. And then it slides up the list to a #1 on a streaming service, and then everyone else finds it. So that fandom being happy is important. However, some of our stories are written over years. Like sometimes a novel, as you know, if it's published once a week, can take 2 years to publish. Well, that means there are massive logic holes by the time from where you started to where you ended. There could be characters that you just all of a sudden stopped writing about for some reason. So there's a lot that can be reckoned with. And now you're also talking about, After is one of our biggest series of all time. So Anna Todd wrote about 1 million words on the platform. The 5th film, I know it just came out last week. I know it came out last week. 5 films is 450 pages worth of script. 1 million words is far more than that. A whole lot has to go. So what we always say is like the data that we can see, because we know what fans love, we know what they're commenting on, we know what they're happy and unhappy about in a story, that kind of give us a bit of a map of what the important bits are. But the reason you're working with screenwriters, award-winning screenwriters, is because they have a view of how this can come to life. It's why you bring a director into the room. It's why you have actors on the other side of the lens. It's because they all bring something to that process. So we always tell our writers, look, at some point we all lose control of this process. I don't get final cut. You don't get final cut. In fact, whoever paid for it gets final cut. And even then, you sometimes don't get final cut because it has to change depending on how you're exhibiting it. So we do spend a lot of time in education with our writers to say, look, what your vision for this isn't necessarily what's going to come out on screen, but our job is to take your vision, the fans' vision, and then the artistic merit around it all and try to put something together. It's beautiful. So we have to be really upfront, though, because a lot of our writers, they started with an idea. They didn't start with, I'm going to be a super famous writer. I'm going to have a story with millions of fans of it. So we do spend a lot of time in education with our creators.
Well, after all, it is an adaptation.
Yes.
All right. We have about 5 minutes to go. So is there a pitching process, or do we have to have a web novel or webcomic on Wattpad, WEBTOON?
This is the best. You cannot pitch me. It breaks a lot of people's hearts, but there's no submitting unless you have something on the platforms. And even then, I have a whole team, which is mostly based here. So my team is quite globally spread out. We have about 30% here, I'd say about 25% in LA, a few people in New York doing publishing, and then scattered around the world. But I have a team here who is basically looking across the platforms for the stories that are important. That doesn't always mean the biggest stories, because the biggest stories, like any platform, data can be used for good and or evil, and biggest stories can promote more stories of the same type. So we're always looking for stories that are maybe under the radar or in a genre that's really important, or from storytelling from a background that isn't floating to the top. So we are very careful about that. But I have a content strategy team that is looking for those. And as we find them, they actually get pitched internally. So that content team will take them to my film team or to my publishing team and say, hey, this is why this is important on the platform. Here's how it's positioned on the platform. Here's why the writer wrote it. Do you see any legs for this? And it's more of an internal pitching process than having writers come pitch to us. When we find something that's interesting, though, we do get in touch with the writers and say, hey, why? Why this? Why now? Why did you write this? That's important for us to understand, too. But number one thing is if you want something through our studio, it has to have been attached to the platform at some point.
Okay, so final question, because Leah's over there waving at me. Can you tell us 3 projects that have been your favorite that have come out of the studio?
3 projects that are my favorite. Don't make me pick favorites.
I gotta make you pick favorites.
That is not okay. Okay. The first big movie hit we had was After, so I will definitely say that. Anna Todd, who I talked about earlier, The Million Words. We were the #1 indie film in the world in 2019. So that was wild when I could not sell that thing for the life of me. We had everyone pass on it. Paramount bought it and then decided, oh, it's not big enough for us, and then kicked it out. So we went the indie route, and it knocked off, small movies like Tenet out of the top place in a lot of countries. So that was an amazing ride. In fact, we still work with Anna. We have an imprint where we're co-publishing our new books together. And actually, if you go to Times Square today, there's a big picture of her new book that Amazon put up because it's selling so well. Lore Olympus, so that is the first Webtoon project I worked on. It is a retelling of Hades and Persephone. If you're a graphic novel person, you have never seen art like this before. It is gorgeous and enthralling. It's written by a woman named Rachel Smythe, who is a graphic designer in New Zealand, and said, maybe I could write a comic. The first time I was in New York, I went to Washington Square, Barnes & Noble, and could buy that book. Was like 8-year-old me started crying knowing that I had something to do with like a graphic novel coming to life. Oh my God, I cry a lot, it's fine. That's a New York Times bestseller. The 5th volume is about to come out. They're all been New York Times bestsellers. So that was a wild moment. The third one, I'll give you the third one. Wattpad Presents was the first series we ever did. It was in Philippines. It's completely based on data. We took the top 20 stories in Philippines. We worked with TV5, which is one of the biggest networks there. And we said, okay, that one, and we turned it into a mini series that ran 22 minutes, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And everyone who loved the first story showed up and stayed to the second week, and so on and so on. We had the #1 youth show in the country. Thousands of people would show up to watch this together in amphitheaters, live every week. So it turned into this like social event, but it was in prime time. So to have like a teen show win the prime time slot was unbelievable. And it was wild. It was so early, like studios didn't exist, and I didn't even know I should get credit on it. So we're not even credited on the bloody thing. But that was a pretty wild experience. That was kind of oh my goodness, we can do a studio. Like we can do this for real. So there's 3 little stories.
Well, that's a good one to wrap it up on, because I'm being yanked off stage right now. The hook is about to come. Aron, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone give a big round of applause.
Thank you, everyone.